My name is Marin Whitfield, and I was 31 the year I learned what a manila folder could do to a family. My grandmother turned 81 on a Saturday in October. She baked her own cake, yellow cake with lemon buttercream, her specialty since before I was born. She set the table for 6 cloth napkins, the wedding china, a jar of the marigolds she still grew along the fence. Nobody came. My parents were at a golf resort in Hilton Head. My brother sent a text at 3:40. "Happy birthday, Grandma. Hope the weather's good there." My mother posted a sunset photo from the 18th green to her book club group chat with the word grateful. I drove 2.5 hours from Columbus after my shift and found her sitting alone at the table. The candles had burned down into the frosting. The lemonade had gone warm. She looked at me like she wasn't sure I was real. I cut her a slice. I sang. The next afternoon, while I was helping her sort the mail, 2 strangers knocked on her door. They handed me a folder, sealed, thick, signed across the flap in my grandmother's own handwriting. What happened after that ended my family as I knew it. Welcome to the channel. If you're new, this is a place for stories about quiet people who set one boundary and changed everything. If a story like that is exactly what you need today, take a second to like this video and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. That evening is pressed into me the way a thumbprint presses into wet clay. I'd left Columbus at 1, still in my work cardigan, a grocery store bouquet wilting on the passenger seat. 2.5 hours on I-70. Then the county roads through Millbrook, where the maples arch over the pavement like a corridor. I pulled into her gravel driveway a little after 4. The porch light wasn't even on yet, because she hadn't needed it, because she'd been expecting people since noon. Inside the kitchen told the whole story. 6 place settings. A centerpiece of marigolds cut that morning and arranged in her grandmother's cut glass vase. The cake sat in the middle, yellow cake, lemon buttercream, 81 candles she'd counted out herself, and stuck into the frosting in careful rows. Most of them had burned down to nubs. A pitcher of lemonade sat sweating rings into the tablecloth. She was in her housecoat at the head of the table, hands folded around a glass of water, waiting. "Grandma?" She looked up, smiled, then frowned, like she was recalibrating something. Is it Sunday?" "It's Saturday. Your birthday." "Oh." She looked at the cake like she was seeing it for the first time. "I thought I was making this for the church social." I set the flowers in a water glass because there was nowhere else, and I fixed her a plate. We ate with our fingers because neither of us wanted to dig through the drawer for clean forks. I sang happy birthday twice, because halfway through the first time she asked me to start over so she could clap along properly. At 9, I helped her to bed. She weighed almost nothing. Her wrist felt like the width of a broom handle. As I tucked the quilt to her chin, her hand shot out and caught mine. Her eyes went sharp all at once, focused, like a radio catching a signal through static. "They think I don't notice," she whispered. I waited for more. She was already asleep. I should tell you who I am in this family. The Whitfields of Millbrook are a particular kind of Ohio comfortable. My father, Richard, spent 30 years as a regional sales director for an agricultural equipment company before he retired into a life of golf memberships and long lunches he called networking. My mother, Renata, ran the events committee at her church and served 2 terms on the library board. My brother Colin owned a landscaping and hardscaping company, Whitfield Outdoor Design, and drove a truck that cost more than my annual salary twice over. Then there was me, the paralegal. I worked at a 3-person elder law and estate planning firm in Columbus. Wills, trusts, guardianship petitions, the unglamorous architecture that holds a family together when nobody's looking. I made $44,000 a year and studied for the paralegal certification exam on my lunch breaks. My family called it my little office job. At Thanksgiving, my mother would tilt her head and say, "Marin still does her paperwork thing in the exact tone you'd use for someone's macrame hobby." I didn't argue. I read fine print for a living. But this house was mine in every way that mattered and no way that counted. I'd learned to ride a bike in that gravel driveway. My grandmother Estelle had taught me to balance a checkbook at her kitchen table when I was 17, her reading glasses low on her nose, a stub of pencil behind her ear. She'd co-signed my first apartment lease because my parents said I needed to learn to stand on my own. I slept in the guest room that night and lay awake tracing the water stain on the ceiling I'd been tracing since I was 7. Around midnight, I got up for a glass of water. On the hallway shelf, tucked behind a framed family photo from some Easter a decade ago, I found a business card, Priya Nagesh and Vance Realty. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, someone had written, comp value approx $510,000. Motivated seller, quick close preferred. I put the card back exactly where I'd found it. My hands were steady. My stomach was not. Sunday morning, I scrubbed the kitchen while Estelle dozed in her recliner with the television murmuring a cooking show she wasn't watching. The cake went into a Tupperware. The burned-down candles went into the trash. I wiped lemon buttercream off the good china and stacked it in the cabinet where it would sit until whoever came to clear out the house someday. That thought landed wrong. I shoved it out of my head and kept wiping the counter. At 11:20, someone knocked. 2 people stood on the porch. The woman was around 60, gray bob, wool coat, a leather satchel over one shoulder. The man beside her, younger, maybe 40, carried a small zippered case I recognized instantly as a notary stamp kit. "Marin Whitfield?" the woman asked. "Yes. My name is Diane Okafor. This is my colleague, Tomas Reyes." She held out a manila folder, thick, sealed with a strip of packing tape across the flap. My grandmother's name written on the tab in blue fountain pen ink. "Your grandmother retained our firm 14 months ago. She asked us to deliver this to you personally. When the time came." When the time came for what? Diane glanced past me toward the recliner visible through the screen door. Her expression softened by a fraction. "Come to my office when you're ready. Here's my card." She pressed it into my free hand. "I'd ask that you not discuss this with your parents before we talk." They were back in their car before I could form a second question. I stood on the porch holding the folder. It was heavier than it looked. The tape had been pressed down over my grandmother's own signature, looping and deliberate, the same hand that signed birthday cards and grocery lists. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother, who was at the door. "Don't sign anything, Marin." I turned the phone face down and carried the folder inside. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where the birthday cake had gone untouched 2 nights before, and ran my thumb along the sealed flap. Estelle's signature crossed the tape. I recognized every curve. The tall capital E, the double loop on the lowercase s, not a shaky mark. Written by a woman who knew precisely what she was putting her name on. I broke the seal. Inside was a stack of documents I recognized from work without needing to be told what they were. A recorded deed, a trust instrument, a durable power of attorney, notarized witness pages, a physician's letter on medical letterhead dated 14 months earlier. Clipped to the front, a handwritten note on her cream stationery, blue ink, the same deliberate script. "Marin, when they come for the house, open this. Everything you need is here. I love you. I'm sorry it has to be you." I read the note 3 times. Each time the words "when they come for the house" landed harder. Not if. When. She'd known. 14 months ago. Before the forgetting got bad. Before she started calling me by my mother's name some afternoons. Before the stove got left on twice. Before the day she got turned around driving to the pharmacy 4 blocks from her house and a neighbor had to bring her home. She'd known someone would come for the house. She'd prepared. I closed the folder and pressed my palm flat against the top of it. Through the doorway, I could hear Estelle's television murmuring, her breath slow and even in the recliner. She'd hired a lawyer. She'd signed documents. She'd left me instructions. That note didn't let me sleep. I lay in the guest room with the folder on the nightstand, listening to the house breathe around me. Monday morning, I called in sick for the first time in 4 years. Something in me said to stay. I found the lockbox while taking out the recycling. A realtor's combination lockbox, clamped to the gas meter behind the forsythia bushes, tucked just out of sight from the front walk. I knew exactly what it was. I'd seen them on every listing I'd ever driven past in Millbrook. Somebody had been showing this house. I went back inside and dug through the mail pile on the hallway table, 3 weeks of unsorted envelopes wedged between a utility bill and a coupon flyer. I found an off-market listing sheet on Nagesh and Vance Realty letterhead, the same Priya Nagesh from the card behind the photo. 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, original hardwood, half-acre lot, listed at $510,000, nearly $40,000 under the last comparable sale in the neighborhood. In the kitchen junk drawer, I found the worst of it. A purchase agreement, unsigned but mostly filled in. Buyer, Redline Property Holdings LLC, cash offer, 21-day close. The seller's signature line was blank, but someone had penciled E. Whitfield in block letters beneath it, like a rehearsal. The seller's representative listed on the agreement was Colin Whitfield. My brother, I sat on the kitchen floor and spread the pages around me like a paper mosaic. The lockbox, the listing sheet, the purchase agreement, Priya's card, a sticky note in my mother's handwriting. Target close, November 9th, 3 weeks away. I picked the folder back up from the counter, and this time I opened it to the first page of the trust instrument and read every word. I called my mother at 6 that evening. Oh, Marin. Her voice had that particular warmth, the one she used on the church committee and the hostess at the country club. Bright, managing. How's Grandma doing? We had the most wonderful time at the resort. There's a lockbox on her gas meter. Silence. 1 second, 2, 3. Sweetheart, that's being handled. Your father and Colin have been working with a lovely agent to find a suitable transition plan for Grandma. You know, she can't manage this big house alone anymore. There's a purchase agreement in her kitchen drawer. Marin? The warmth dropped a register. This is a family decision between your father, your brother, and me. We've been managing Grandma's affairs for months. You don't need to worry about the details. Does she know the house is being sold? She knows what she needs to know. A pause. I heard the faint clink of a wine glass. Colin's company is going through a difficult stretch. The house can fund a proper memory care facility for Grandma and get your brother through a rough patch. It's the responsible thing to do. It's her house, Mom. Marin? The register dropped all the way to the basement. Cold, final. Your grandmother has dementia. She left the stove on twice last month. She got lost 4 blocks from her own house. She is not the person who should be making decisions about a $500,000 asset. Then she said it. She won't remember the house by Christmas. The line hummed between us. Then it's a good thing I remember, I said. I hung up. I picked up the manila folder and Diane Okafor's business card and held them side by side under the kitchen light. Tomorrow I would drive to Columbus. Tonight, I had reading to do. Diane Okafor's office was on the 2nd floor of a converted brick building near German Village, a small brass plaque reading Okafor and Reyes, Elder Law and Estate Planning. I'd called at 7:30 that morning. Her receptionist put me through in under a minute, which if you know anything about law offices, tells you they'd been expecting the call. Ms. Whitfield. Diane's voice carried the same measured calm from the porch. I'm glad you reached out. Can you come in today? I drove the 2.5 hours again. Diane met me in a small conference room with a pot of tea and a box of tissues placed exactly between us on the table without comment. Your grandmother came to me 14 months ago, she began. Early August of last year. She'd had an episode, got turned around driving, ended up on the wrong side of town. Couldn't remember the route home. A neighbor brought her back. She called our office the next morning. She already knew you, knew the firm. Her friend Marjorie had used us for an estate plan years ago. Your grandmother came in alone. She was sharp, focused. Diane paused. She was scared. Of what? Of exactly what's happening now, she told me. And I remember this almost word for word. My son will do whatever Renata tells him, and Renata will sell the house the moment I can't stop her. She wanted to stop it before she couldn't. I put my tea down. She chose you specifically, Ms. Whitfield. She said you were the only one who would fight for the house, because you were the only one who understood what it meant. Diane opened her own copy of the folder. Let me walk you through what she built. 14 months earlier, in pressed slacks and her good coat, my grandmother had walked into this office carrying a folder of her own, the deed, tax records, her will from 1991, a list of questions handwritten on yellow legal paper in the same looping blue ink I'd seen on the note, She was methodical, Diane said. She told me she'd noticed the forgetting start with names, then appointments, then routes she'd driven for 40 years. Her doctor had used the phrase early stage. She told me she thought she had maybe a year, maybe two, before the window closed. The window for what? For making legally binding decisions while she still had capacity. Diane turned a page. She wanted two things. First, to protect the house. Second, to choose who would protect her when she no longer could. And she didn't choose my father. Diane looked at me over her reading glasses. No, she did not. She said it without inflection, but the weight of it settled in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. My father was Estelle's only child. He'd grown up in that kitchen. She'd put him through college, signed his first car loan, danced with him at his wedding. And when the time came to hand someone the keys to her life, she'd driven straight past him and come to me. Because she knew Richard would defer to Renata. She knew Renata would calculate. She knew Colin would need. Your grandmother executed the documents on August 6th of last year, Diane continued. Full capacity. Adeas Nwosu, her neurologist, provided a written evaluation the same day confirming she understood the nature and consequences of everything she signed. Diane tapped the physician's letter. This is your foundation. The legal architecture was clean. I recognized every instrument. Item 1, a revocable living trust. Estelle had transferred the house, deed and title into the Estelle Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, dated August 6th. She served as trustee while she had capacity. I was named successor trustee. If she became incapacitated, legal control of the house passed to me. Not my father, not Colin. Me? Item 2, a durable power of attorney, naming me as her agent for all financial and healthcare decisions. The durability clause meant it survived incapacity. It didn't expire when she got sick. It activated. Item 3, the physician's letter. Dr. Nwosu had examined her that same day and documented that she demonstrated full testamentary capacity. She understood what a trust was. She understood what a power of attorney did. She understood she was placing her house beyond the reach of anyone except the granddaughter she trusted. So the house isn't hers anymore, I said. Technically correct. The house belongs to the trust. Your grandmother can't sell it as an individual. And under this structure, no one holding a personal power of attorney over her has any authority over assets already transferred into the trust. Only the trustee can authorize a sale. And the trustee is me. Once your grandmother is determined to lack capacity, yes. Diane leaned forward. Based on what you've described, the stove incidents, the disorientation, the successor trustee provisions are very likely already active. She paused. Ms. Whitfield, there's something else you should know. If your family has had her sign anything recently, a new power of attorney, a listing agreement, while she lacked capacity, those documents may not be enforceable at all. She let that sit. They may have had her sign something newer. I drove back to Millbrook that evening. The house was quiet, porch light finally on. Through the front window, I could see Estelle in her recliner, TV murmuring, reading glasses folded on the armrest. I let myself in with the spare key she'd given me when I was 16, the one she'd never given my parents. Grandma, she looked up, 3 seconds, maybe 4. Her eyes were absolutely clear. Not the soft fog of most days, clear like creek water over stone. You went to see Diane, she said. I stopped in the doorway. You remember her? I remember enough. She turned her reading glasses over in her hands. I remember I was scared, and I went to a lawyer and I told her what your mother would do. Did I get it right? I sat on the arm of the couch. You got it exactly right, Grandma. Good. She put the glasses on, then took them off again as though she'd forgotten why she'd reached for them. They've been bringing people through the house on Wednesdays, when the aide is here. I hear the doors, strangers looking at my kitchen. I know. Your father won't look at me when he visits. He talks to the walls. She pressed her lips together. Colin brought papers. I don't remember what I signed. I took her hand. It doesn't matter what you signed, you already took care of it. She squeezed my fingers. Thin but deliberate. "I'm not gone yet, Marin." The words hung in the kitchen air between us, fragile and fierce. By tomorrow, she might not remember saying them. I would remember for both of us. Colin showed up Wednesday. He didn't knock. He never knocked. Just walked in with his truck keys jingling and his smile already switched on, the way he entered every room like it should be glad he'd arrived. "Hey, Mare." He kissed the top of my head. He smelled like cedar cologne and new truck leather. "Checking on Grandma? Sweet of you." "I'm staying for a while." "Oh, yeah?" He opened the fridge, helped himself to a sparkling water, leaned against the counter like he owned it. "Taking some time off from the paralegal gig?" He said paralegal gig the way you'd say hobby. "Colin, I know about the listing." His chin paused halfway to his mouth. One beat, two. Then the smile adjusted. "Not gone. Reclassified. Warmth to negotiation." "Look, I know it seems fast, but here's the thing. The company's in a rough stretch. I've got a balloon payment coming due in 7 weeks. 610,000. If I miss it, the bank takes everything. Every job site, every contract. 3 years of work? Gone. So you're selling Grandma's house." "I'm helping the family manage an asset she can't manage herself." He set the can down. "Marin, the money solves everything. Grandma gets a nice facility. Mom and Dad stop worrying. I keep my business. Everybody wins. Except Grandma. Grandma doesn't know what year it is half the time, but she knows people are walking through her house." Colin's jaw tightened. He stepped closer. "Don't make this difficult. We're family." "Family helps family? Is that what you told her when you brought the papers?" He stared at me. Then the smile came back, harder now. "Performative. It's basically sold already, Marin." Closing set. He left his empty can on the counter and walked out without rinsing it. That night, I searched the bottom drawer of the hallway credenza, behind a stack of old church bulletins. I found what they'd had her sign. A power of attorney dated August 28th, barely 2 months ago, naming Richard Whitfield as her agent for all financial and property decisions. Stapled behind it, a listing authorization for the house, also dated August 28th, granting Colin the right to act as seller's representative. I carried both documents to the kitchen table and laid them beside the originals from Diane's folder. The signature difference hit me before I'd finished unfolding the pages. Estelle's trust documents from 14 months ago. Strong pen pressure, clean, confident loops, every letter connecting to the next, that distinctive tail on the capital E. I knew this hand. This was the woman who wrote grocery lists in flowing cursive and signed my high school permission slips with a fountain pen. The August power of attorney, trembling lines. The E barely rose above the baseline. The loops had collapsed. The pen had lifted between letters, leaving gaps where flow should have been. This was not the hand of a woman who understood what she was signing. This was the hand of a woman who was told where to press down. I pulled up the calendar on my phone and checked the date. August 28th was the same week Estelle had been taken to the emergency room after a fall. I remembered a text from my mother. Grandma took a little tumble. Nothing serious, resting comfortably. I'd thought nothing of it. The discharge summary, which I found later in the mail pile, noted patient disoriented, intermittent confusion, recommend neurological follow-up. They'd had her sign a power of attorney during the same week she'd been hospitalized for confusion. I took photographs of everything. Then I called Diane. Diane came to the house on Friday, not her office. The house? She said it mattered that we do this at Estelle's kitchen table, and I understood why the moment she laid everything out. The table was old oak, scratched from 4 decades of holidays. The surface, my grandmother always said, told the story of every meal that had happened on it. Now it held 5 documents in a row, edges squared, the way you'd lay evidence before a judge. Document 1, the recorded trust deed, filed with the Millbrook County Recorder on August 9th of last year. The house at 214 Larkspur Lane had been legally transferred into the Estelle Whitfield Revocable Living Trust 14 months earlier. Stamped, indexed, public record. Document 2, the durable power of attorney naming me, Marin Whitfield, as Estelle's agent, executed the same day, notarized, 2 independent witnesses. Document 3, Dr. Nwosu's capacity evaluation letter, 2 pages, clinical and precise. Mrs. Whitfield demonstrates full understanding of the nature and consequences of the legal instruments she is executing. She is oriented to time, place, and person, and identifies her assets accurately. Document 4, the August power of attorney naming my father. Shaky signature, no capacity evaluation, no independent witnesses, executed during a documented week of medical confusion. Document 5, the listing agreement. Collins' name as seller's representative, Priya Nagesh as agent. An off-market sale priced nearly $40,000 below comparable homes. Diane stood across from me, hands flat on the table. The house has been in the trust for over a year, she said. Your grandmother cannot sell it as an individual. The August power of attorney, even if it were otherwise valid, doesn't grant authority over trust assets, and it almost certainly isn't valid at all, given the medical record. She looked at me. This sale cannot close. The house was never theirs to sell. I stared at the 2 signatures side by side, one strong, one trembling. The physician's letter that drew a clean line between the woman Estelle was, and the woman they'd taken advantage of. She won't remember the house by Christmas. My mother's voice still echoing. But Estelle had remembered. She'd remembered before any of them thought to ask. Diane and I made a plan. Quiet, methodical, built on paper, not anger. Step 1. A current capacity evaluation for Estelle. Something a court would accept to confirm the August power of attorney was signed when she lacked the ability to understand it. I called Dr. Nwosu's office Monday morning. The receptionist put me on hold for 9 minutes. When she came back, her voice had a careful, practiced quality I recognized from my own work. The tone people use when delivering bad news wrapped in protocol. I'm sorry, Ms. Whitfield, but we've received a request to restrict access to Mrs. Whitfield's medical records. I gripped the phone. Restrict from whom? I can't disclose that. But the request came in approximately 6 weeks ago, and it specifies records aren't to be released to anyone besides the designated family contact. Who is the designated contact? A pause. Richard Whitfield. My father. They'd locked me out of her medical records. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. 6 weeks ago, right after they'd gotten her to sign the power of attorney. They hadn't just gotten her to sign. They'd built a wall around her. I called Diane. They restricted her records. Expected, Diane said, unsurprised. We'll file a release under the durable power of attorney. Yours predates theirs and names you as healthcare agent. The clinic is legally obligated to honor it. I'll send the paperwork today. 2 days later, I had the records. Dr. Nwosu agreed to perform a current evaluation. The system works, I told myself. Slowly, but it works. My mother came to the house on a Thursday evening. She didn't bring flowers or food or anything you'd bring if you were visiting your mother-in-law. She brought a brochure, Cedar Grove Memory Care. She spread it on the kitchen table, the same table where Diane and I had laid out the documents 3 days before. It's a beautiful facility, Marin. Private rooms, a garden, activities every afternoon. Grandma doesn't want to leave her house. Grandma doesn't know what she wants. She smoothed the brochure with both palms. Your father and I have been looking into this for weeks. If we transition her before Thanksgiving, we can have the house staged and listed by December 1st. I looked at her. She was wearing her good cardigan and the pearl earrings she'd worn at the golf resort. You're staging the house for the buyer you already have. Her expression flickered. Just a crack in the plaster. Marin, I know this is emotional for you. You've always been attached to this house. But your brother's company is in real trouble, and this family needs to pull together by selling an 81-year-old woman's home out from under her. After everything I've done for this family, her voice cracked. Real tears or performative ones, I couldn't tell. After 31 years, I'd stopped trying to tell the difference. The papers are already with the title company, she said. Closing is November 9th. This is happening, Marin. She left the brochure on the table. I almost walked away that. It would have been easier, but if you've ever watched someone decide that an older person's worth came with an expiration date, you already know exactly why I stayed. If this is hitting close to home, type I see her in the comments and subscribe because you'll want to be here for what happens at the closing table. I had 9 days. The closing was set for November 9th at Meridian Title Services on Church Street, 3 blocks from the Millbrook Town Square. My mother had booked it like a dinner reservation. Efficient, final, not open for discussion. I sat in Diane's conference room the next morning and laid out the options. Option 1. File an emergency petition with probate court to block the sale. It would work. Diane was confident, but it would be public, slow, expensive, and it would give Colin and my mother time to scramble. Time to move Estelle. Time to hire their own attorney. Time to muddy the water. Option 2. Let the closing happen. Walk in with the documents. Let the truth do what truth does when it meets paperwork that can't withstand it. If you show up at the closing with the recorded trust deed and the capacity evidence, Diane said, the title company will do the work for you. They can't insure a title in dispute. They won't close the transaction. It ends in that room. If they try to push through anyway, title officers are personally liable. No officer with any sense records a deed they know is defective. She took off her glasses. This is the quieter path. No courtroom, just documents on a table in front of witnesses. The buyer, the agent, the title officer, your family, all in one room, and the documents will speak for themselves. I thought about Estelle's note. When they come for the house, she hadn't told me to go to court. She'd given me a folder. Let the documents talk, Diane said. 9 days. I went home and started counting. Day 1 of 9. I filed a report with Ohio's Adult Protective Services. I sat in my car outside the county building and dialed the elder abuse hotline. The intake worker was patient, precise, and completely unsurprised by anything I described. She'd heard versions of it before. Different names, same architecture. I gave her the facts. An 81-year-old woman with documented dementia. A power of attorney signed during a week of hospitalization, an off-market home sale priced below comparable value, a son profiting from the transaction, a daughter-in-law directing the process. We'll assign an investigator, she said. You'll receive a case number within 72 hours. Is there anything that expedites it? There's a closing date in 9 days. I'll flag it as time-sensitive. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in the car for a full minute watching 2 elderly women walk arm in arm into the library across the street, laughing about something normal, safe. When I got back to the house, I found a voicemail from Diane. Marin's, something interesting. APS told me informally that yours isn't the first report on this situation. Someone filed an anonymous complaint about 6 weeks ago. They didn't follow up at the time because the complainant left no contact information. But the file exists. 6 weeks ago, right around the time they'd gotten Estelle to sign the August power of attorney, someone else had seen what was happening, someone who hadn't been brave enough to leave a name, but had cared enough to make the call. I didn't know who. Not then. But the fact that the file already existed meant APS wasn't starting from zero. The system was slower than anger, but it was building. Day 4. My father came alone. He pulled into the driveway in the old Buick he kept for errands, not the car he drove to the club. He sat behind the wheel a long time before getting out. I watched from the kitchen window. His shoulders were hunched. He looked smaller than I remembered. He came in through the back door, the way he'd entered this house since he was a boy. He didn't acknowledge me at first. He just stood in the kitchen and looked at the cabinets his mother had painted herself. The window over the sink where she'd hung a prism that threw small rainbows across the floor every morning. She used to sing at that sink, he said, barely above a whisper. Every Sunday morning, I remember. He sat at the table, put his hands flat on the surface. I saw them shake. I know what you think of me, he said. I waited. I didn't want any of this. Colin's in over his head. Renata says the house is the only way. And Mom, his voice broke, a hairline fracture in a foundation. Mom wouldn't want Colin to lose everything. You could still stop this, Dad. He looked at me for 1 second. 1 long, trembling second. I saw the boy who'd grown up in this kitchen, who'd eaten cake off these plates, who'd been carried to bed by the same woman now dozing in the next room. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Renata. He stood. I should go. He left through the back door. He didn't say goodbye to his mother. I washed his coffee cup and put it away. Day 5, I bought a cake. Not a fancy one. A small round from the bakery on Elm, yellow cake with lemon buttercream, because that's what she loved. And a single candle, because 81 seemed like a fire hazard. And I wanted to make her laugh. I set it on the kitchen table at 3. 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 napkins. I made tea. Grandma, come sit. She shuffled in from the living room, reading glasses on top of her head, a crossword folded in her cardigan pocket. She saw the cake and stopped. Whose birthday? Yours. We're doing it over. She sat. I lit the candle. She looked at the flame the way you look at something you're trying to hold in your mind carefully, deliberately, like if she stared hard enough, the moment would stick. Make a wish. She closed her eyes. She blew. The candle went out on the first try. What did you wish for? She looked at me with those clear creek eyes. I wished you'd stay. We ate cake with forks this time. She told me about the marigolds she'd planted along the fence in 1979, the year my father was born. She told me the kitchen table had come from her own mother's farmhouse in Zanesville, carried in on the back of a truck in 1968, and that every scratch on its surface was a holiday she'd won. Then she put her fork down and leaned toward me. Don't let them take the table, she said. Quiet, fierce. I won't, Grandma. The table stays. I cleared the plates. I washed the dish. I wrapped the leftover cake in foil and wrote Grandma's birthday round 2 on it with a marker. 4 days until the closing. Day 6. The phone calls started. My Aunt Barbara, my father's cousin, called first. Careful, concerned. Marin, honey, your mother says you're trying to take control of Grandma's finances. She says she used the word manipulating. I held the phone away from my ear and looked at the ceiling. Aunt Barbara, did Renata mention that she and Colin are trying to sell Grandma's house while Grandma has dementia? Silence. She said it was a family decision. It's a decision Grandma didn't make. My mother's friend from the church committee called next. Then Colin's business partner. Then a woman from the garden club who'd known Estelle for 30 years. Each call carried the same script, slight variations on the same theme. Marin is overstepping. Marin is emotional. Marin doesn't understand the family's financial situation. My mother had done what my mother did best. She'd shaped the narrative before I had a chance to speak. I didn't counter it. I didn't post anything online. I didn't call anyone back to plead my case. Diane had told me the documents speak. You don't have to. But on day 6, around 9 at night, my phone rang one more time. My great-aunt Josephine, Estelle's younger sister, 83, still sharp, still in Zanesville. Marin, her voice was dry and clear. I don't believe a word your mother is saying, and I want you to know why. Why? Because your grandmother called me last year. August. She said she'd been to see a lawyer. She said she was putting the house in order while she still could. She said, if anything happens, back Marin up. I gripped the phone. I'm backing you up, Aunt Josephine said. Whatever you need. 3 days until the closing. Day 7. Diane and I confirmed the details. Meridian Title Services, November 9th, 2 o'clock, conference room A. The escrow officer was a woman named Carol Vance, 20 years in the business. Diane's contact said thorough, by the book. The buyer was Redline Property Holdings, a regional cash acquisition firm that bought undervalued residential properties, renovated or rented them, and moved on. Their representative was a man named Jason Feld. He'd been copied on the listing and purchase contract. Priya Nagesh would attend as the listing agent. Renata and Colin would attend as sellers' representatives. Richard would come because Renata told him to. Diane made one more call to the title company off the record and learned something that made her pause. Carol Vance flagged the file 3 weeks ago, Diane told me. During the preliminary title search, she noted the house was held in a trust. She contacted Priya Nagesh for clarification. Priya sent over a signed affidavit claiming the trust had been dissolved, and the property reconveyed to Estelle individually. Carol accepted it provisionally, but noted in her file that no recorded reconveyance deed had been found. The closing's been scheduled as tentative, pending final title clearance. A clerical error, Priya had told her. The trust had been dissolved. The property returned to Estelle's individual name. That wasn't true. The trust was never dissolved. The deed was still recorded. The deal was already standing on cracked ice. Carol Vance had a flag in the file. Priya Nagesh had lied. The recorded trust deed was public record. All it needed was someone to put the original on the table. Here's the thing about paperwork people underestimate. It doesn't raise its voice, and it doesn't forget. If you've ever been the quiet one nobody took seriously, this next part is for you. Subscribe and stay with me to the closing table. 2 days left. Day 8. Everything was in place. Diane would attend as Estelle's attorney of record, representing the trust. She'd bring certified copies of the recorded trust deed, the durable power of attorney, and the physician's capacity evaluation. Tomas Reyes would come as a notary witness. Apes had assigned an investigator named Priyanka Suresh. She wouldn't be in the room. That wasn't how it worked, but she'd confirmed the case was active and time-sensitive. Whatever happened at the closing would become part of her file. I spent the afternoon at the kitchen table reviewing the documents one more time. Trust deed, POA, capacity letter, the August power of attorney with its shaking signature, the listing agreement, the purchase contract, the discharge summary from Estelle's hospital stay. Everything lined up, every date, every signature, every medical note pointed in the same direction. I practiced what I would say. Short sentences, no accusations, no raised voice. Just facts, delivered at the volume of a normal conversation. Diane had coached me. You're not there to argue. You're not there to convince anyone. You're there to present documents that speak for themselves. Let the title officer do the rest. I wasn't the daughter's paperwork job, the one they'd dismissed at Thanksgiving. I was the successor trustee of the Estelle Whitfield Revocable Living Trust. I had every legal right to sit at that table. More than a right, an obligation. That evening, I ironed a blouse and set out my flats. The same flats I'd worn the night I drove 2.5 hours to sing happy birthday to a woman sitting alone in her kitchen. Tomorrow, they'd sit down to sign for a house that wasn't theirs. And I would be there when they found out. The night before the closing, I sat with Estelle in the living room. She was having a good hour, not a good day. Those were rare now, but a good hour. She was working on a crossword with her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, filling in the squares with a ballpoint pen. No pencil, she always said. Pencils were for people who didn't trust themselves. Grandma, tomorrow's a big day. She didn't look up. 7 across. Legal instrument of protection. 5 letters. I smiled. Trust. She wrote it in. Smarty pants. I watched her hand. The pen moved slowly but with intention. The letters were small and careful. Not the looping confidence of 14 months ago, but not the collapse of the August signature either. Somewhere in between, a woman at the edge of the window still reaching for the glass. She set the crossword down and looked at me. You're staying. I'm staying. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out her glasses case, the worn leather one with the brass clasp she'd carried since I was a girl. She opened it, took out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me. A note in her handwriting, shaky, but legible. For Marin, the keeper of the table. Below it, her signature. Not the strong one from last year, not the collapsed one from August. A middle ground, trembling but intentional. Written by a woman who knew she was fading and wanted to leave one more mark while she still could. I'm not gone yet, she said. I folded the note into my wallet. In the morning, the folder, the note, and I would go to the closing together. Meridian Title Services occupied a single-story brick building on Church Street with tinted windows and a brass door handle polished to a mirror finish. I parked across the street at 1:45. Diane pulled in beside me at 1:50. Tomas was already inside. We walked in together. Diane carried her briefcase. I carried the manila folder. Conference room A was small. 10 chairs around an oval table, a water pitcher, a printer humming in the corner. Carol Vance, the escrow officer, was arranging documents in neat stacks at the head of the table. She looked up when we entered, glanced at Diane, and paused half a second. The kind of pause that meant she recognized the name. Ms. Okafor, I didn't see your firm listed on the transaction. I represent the Estelle Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, Diane said. We have documents relevant to this closing. Carol's pen stopped moving. Before she could respond, the door opened behind us. My mother came in first. Good cardigan, pearls. The smile already in position, bright and social, the hostess arriving at her own party. Colin followed in a tailored jacket, jaw set, a leather portfolio under his arm. My father trailed them, gray-faced, looking at the floor. Behind them came Priya Nagesh, blonde highlights, heels, a stack of closing documents fanned in her hand like a winning hand of cards. And last, Jason Feld, the buyer's representative, navy suit, no-nonsense expression. My mother saw me and stopped. Marin. She looked at Diane at the folder in my hands. Her smile didn't change, but the muscles underneath it did. What are you doing here? Taking a seat, I said. I sat down. Diane sat beside me. I placed the manila folder in front of me, and I waited. The room was very quiet. The printer had stopped humming. Carol Vance looked at Diane. You said you have documents. I do. Diane opened her briefcase and laid 3 items on the table, one at a time, each centered and square, the way you'd lay evidence before a judge. First, a certified copy of the recorded trust deed. This deed was recorded with the Millbrook County Recorder on August 9th of last year. It transfers the property at 214 Larkspur Lane into the Estelle Whitfield Revocable Living Trust. Ms. Whitfield? She nodded toward me. Is the successor trustee? My mother's smile fell, not all at once in stages, like a building losing floors. Second, the durable power of attorney naming Marin as Estelle's agent. Executed on August 6th of last year. Notarized, witnessed, currently in effect. Colin leaned forward. We have a more recent power of attorney that supersedes. Third, Diane placed the physician's letter on the table. A capacity evaluation by Dr. Ada Ezenwasu, Estelle's neurologist, dated August 6th. It confirms she had full testamentary capacity when she signed these documents. I also have Dr. Wasu's current evaluation, completed last week, confirming Estelle now lacks capacity, meaning any documents she signed after her cognitive decline, including the August power of attorney your family obtained, were signed without the legal competence required to make them binding. The room went still. Carol picked up the trust deed. She read it. She compared it to the title report in her file. She looked at Priya Nagesh. Ms. Nagesh, you informed me the trust had been dissolved. Priya's face went white. I was told. The trust was never dissolved, Diane said. The recorded deed confirms it. This property belongs to the trust. The sale cannot proceed. Carol Vance set the documents down, squared her shoulders, and said the 5 words that ended it. I cannot close this transaction. She meant every word. Jason Feld closed his portfolio. Priya stared at the table. Colin gripped the armrests of his chair until his knuckles went pale. And my mother looked at me like I'd pulled the house out from under her feet. The silence lasted 4 seconds, then my mother broke it. This is ridiculous. Her voice climbed. She stood, palms flat on the table, pearls swinging. Marin is a paralegal. She has no authority. My husband is Estelle's son, her only child, and he has a signed power of attorney that gives him full. A power of attorney signed by a woman who was hospitalized for confusion the same week. Diane said even, measured. A power of attorney with no capacity evaluation attached. A power of attorney that, even if valid, does not grant authority over assets held in a trust. You can't do this. Colin stood now too. His voice wasn't my mother's theatrical escalation. It was raw. I have a $610,000 payment due in 6 weeks. If this deal falls through, Mr. Whitfield, your financial obligations are not this office's concern, Carol said. This is my grandmother's house. This is the trust's house, Diane corrected, administered by the trustee your grandmother appointed. That trustee is sitting at this table. Colin turned on me. You're going to destroy this family. I looked at him. I kept my voice at exactly the volume I'd practiced. Conversational, steady. You tried to sell an 81-year-old woman's home while she sat alone on her birthday eating cake. Nobody came to cut it. You had her sign documents during a hospital stay. You lied to the title company about a dissolved trust. And you're telling me I'm the one destroying this family? Colin's mouth opened, closed. His fists were clenched at his sides. My mother was crying now. Loud. Messy. After everything I've done. My father sat motionless. He hadn't spoken since he'd entered the room. He stared at the trust deed, at his mother's signature, and I could see him doing the math. She'd planned this. She'd gone around him, she'd looked at her only son and decided he wasn't enough. Jason Feld stood. I think we're done here. He nodded to Carol and walked out. Priya was already gathering her things, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Diane spoke into the quiet. For the record, an Adult Protective Services investigation into the financial exploitation of Estelle Whitfield is currently active. The August power of attorney will be formally challenged. Any further attempts to sell, encumber, or transfer trust property without the trustee's authorization will be treated as a legal matter. My mother stopped crying. She stared at Diane, then at me, tears still wet on her cheeks, but the expression underneath shifting from grief to something harder. You'll regret this, she said. When Colin loses his company, when your father has nowhere to turn, when this family falls apart, you'll remember that you did this. I stood up. I picked up the manila folder and placed it in my bag. I looked at my mother, at the cardigan, the pearls, the tears she'd learned to deploy like weather. You don't get to decide what she's worth, I said. Then I turned to Carol Vance. Thank you for your professionalism. Ms. Whitfield. Carol nodded. I'll be documenting this closing as void and flagging the file. You'll receive confirmation by email. I walked out of conference room A. Diane followed. Tomas held the door. The November air hit my face cold and clean, and I stood on the sidewalk for 10 full seconds before I remembered to breathe. Diane touched my elbow. You did well. I did what she asked me to. That's what I mean. I drove back to Larkspur Lane with the folder on the passenger seat, exactly where the grocery store bouquet had sat 9 days earlier. The house was still there. The marigolds were still along the fence. The porch light was on. I went inside and found Estelle asleep in her recliner, crossword in her lap, reading glasses on. I knelt beside her chair and tucked the quilt around her shoulders. It's done, Grandma, I said. The house is safe, she stirred. Her hand found mine. The same thin grip, the same broom handle wrist. Her eyes opened, cloudy at first, then clearing for just a moment. Marin, I am here. I know, Grandma. Did you keep the table? I laughed. A real one, the kind that comes up from somewhere deep and surprises you. I kept the table. She smiled. Small, certain. Good girl. She closed her eyes. Within a minute, she was asleep again, breathing slow and even, the crossword rising and falling on her chest. I sat on the floor beside her recliner and looked through the doorway at the kitchen, at the oak table, scratched and marked, still standing where it had stood since 1968. The folder was in my bag. The note was in my wallet. The house was in the trust. And for the first time in 9 days, the counting stopped. Here's what happened after. Colin's balloon payment came due 6 weeks later, right on schedule. He missed it. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on his development projects, 2 half-finished subdivisions in Grove City, and a commercial lot near the interstate. Whitfield Outdoor Design filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in January. He sold the truck. Last I heard, he was working as a project manager for someone else's company, making 1/3 of what he used to pay. He never called to apologize. My mother's standing in Millbrook fractured. Not all at once. Reputations erode slowly in small towns, but the story leaked. People talk. Aunt Josephine talked. Carol Vance documented everything in the closing file. The church committee group chat, the one where my mother had posted her Gulf Resort sunset with the word grateful, went quiet around her. She stopped attending library board meetings. She and my father moved to a condo in Dublin in the spring. My father emailed me once in March. 3 sentences. I should have done more. I know that now. I'm sorry. I read it twice. I didn't respond. Some apologies are too late to be anything but a record of what a person knows they should have said. APS substantiated the complaint. Over the following 3 months, through 2 probate hearings that no one in my family contested, the August power of attorney was formally voided. The court appointed me as Estelle's legal guardian and confirmed my role as permanent trustee. I deferred my paralegal certification exam. I took a leave of absence from the firm. I moved into the guest room at 214 Larkspur Lane, the one with the water stain on the ceiling I'd been tracing since I was 7, and I became the person who made sure Estelle Whitfield ate dinner, took her medication, and sat on the porch in the afternoons when the light came through the marigolds. It wasn't the career step I'd planned, it was the right one. On a Tuesday in April, I baked a cake. Yellow cake, lemon buttercream, nothing fancy. I set it on the kitchen table, the table from Zanesville, the one that had survived 4 decades of holidays and 1 attempted theft. Estelle came in from the living room, crossword in hand. Whose birthday? Nobody's, it's Tuesday. We're having cake because it's Tuesday. She sat down, she picked up a fork, she took a bite and closed her eyes. This is my recipe, she said. It's good. Don't change it. We ate in the kitchen with the afternoon light striping through the window. The prism still hung above the sink, throwing small rainbows across the floor. The table held. A person's worth doesn't expire when their memory does, and the quietest love in a family is sometimes the only one keeping watch. That's my story. 1 empty birthday, 1 manila folder, and a grandmother who remembered first. If this reminded you to check on a loved one's directive, do it today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.